Good morning. It is 7:15. The sun is just starting to come up, and it's May. And I think we need to go look at the garden because May is like peak month in Central Texas for the garden before it starts getting hot. So let's go see what's growing on. Okay, we're gonna start here. We're kind of gonna run away from the sun as it comes up, but this bed is my tomatillos, marigolds, and my heirloom slicer tomatoes. And wow, let me tell you, moving my tomatillos this year from an area where their roots were too wet to kind of an upper elevation where the water honestly runs away from them, game changer. And actually, one of you lovely people were the ones that told me that they didn't like to have wet feet. So yeah, the tomatillos are looking unreal. I mean, I'm 5 feet tall. I'm not the tallest person in the world, but they're just about as tall as me at this point, which is crazy. I also always interplant marigolds within all of my beds, to be honest with you. I'm a big believer in that, and these Cracker Jack marigolds have been gorgeous and lovely. And I got this really cool photo of a Kern's flower scarab. It's this really cool beetle that like buries itself down in the center of the marigold, and from my research, they don't actually eat the marigold. They kind of just get a little drunk in there. So it's been really fun watching out for those, and we haven't actually harvested any tomatillos yet, but they're a brewing, and the bees are in love with them. Now let's talk about these are all of my heirloom slicer tomatoes. The varieties are Dr. Weitch's yellow, Cherokee purple, Valencia, Paul Robeson, and a fifth one that I can't think of right at this very moment. Embarrassing. Pink Brandywine. That's what it is. So they're doing really, really well. In normal brook fashion, I did not get the trellises up when I should have. So that's been a small challenge, but not the end of the world. And then also my pruning has not been excellent. So we have a couple double, triple liters going on, but that's okay. It's fine. And the tomatoes look really good. They look really big. They look healthy. I'm seeing less tomato blooms overall in the garden this year, which is weird and interesting, but like fine. We'll see what happens. I feel like I do this every year where I'm like, it's different, and then I get the same amount of tomatoes every year. So like, do with that information what you will. Now, my cucumbers. Cucumbers here in this part of the country are always kind of a short season crop because it needs to be our number of days between freezing and too hot is surprisingly short. But we've gotten tons of cucumbers. Like once they start going, they start going. And honestly, I think it's helped. We've had a very, very, very gray spring. We have not had that much sun. So I think that's honestly helped the cucumbers because even on the hot days, they're not getting like sunburned. So maybe it's been good for them. We've been getting a lot of cucumbers. And I'm growing two varieties. This is called a Be It Alpha. I'm pretty sure it's a hybrid from So Right Seeds. And then I'm growing the Silver Slicer from, I don't remember what that seed company's called. So I'm growing two different varieties, the Be It Alpha, which is a hybrid, and the Silver Slicer, which I'm not sure if that's a hybrid, but it's supposed to do well, a little bit better in the heat. And with these, the Be It Alpha, I'm finding that if you harvest them a bit smaller, the seeds get really big and tough really quick. So I'm trying to harvest them pretty young. I also love cucumbers. Like I'll eat one of these a day in a salad. They're like, I'll just eat it. They're great. I love them so much. So we have about another week where we're like teetering in the 80s, and then we're gonna start teetering on the 90s. So I think our weeks are numbered very low for our cucumbers. These are all of my sauce tomatoes, all of my Romas, everything that will get canned, and it is, I mean, the only thing holding this up are like stakes and twine. I made an Instagram reel about how ridiculous this is, and I said that like it's being held up with twine and prayers, which is not that far off, to be honest with you, because we get one crazy storm and a rogue wind hits this thing, we're done. So But I've been really enjoying how wild this bed is. It's just, we've got squash and basil and marigolds and tomatoes, and it's been crazy. I did see a squash vine borer the other day, so that means I have to come out every day now, check the summer squash for eggs. And I am growing a type of squash called a Mexican tatum squash, and it has a few squash on it. You can either eat it as like a young squash, or you can let it harden and be a winter squash. I'm kind of letting it go, see what happens, but it is spilling out of the bed. It's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, I've just so enjoyed, like I said, just the wildness of it all. It's very charming. Feels very like lived in. So this is that Mexican tatum squash I was talking about, and there's a couple of these that I can see that are just doing their thing. It's pretty hard. So I mean, and it is like all throughout the bottom of this bed. It's honestly a great ground cover. And then my determinate tomatoes, there's like a very marked height difference. It's like they're all the same height, and then like boop boop. So I don't know if that's the varieties, because I did plant them in clumps. So it could be the varieties, but it could be the soil. Maybe I didn't spread the soil amendments good enough. I'm not really sure. But there's so much basil hiding in here, and I think it's actually doing better and lasting longer because it's a little more shaded by everything. Usually it would kind of be struggling. But I think the Roma tomatoes, I mean, they're literally holding each other up. It's like a wall. It's like a wall of tomatoes happening. And I still do have like some garlic that needs to be pulled, so TBD on when that gets pulled. I just never have good luck with garlic for whatever reason. Oh, here's another squash, and this variety of squash is supposedly squash vine borer resistant, or does better with them, but we're gonna find out. And then when we come around to the back of the bed is just as wild. So I do have a crookneck squash. So we have one down there that's ready to harvest finally. I'm pretty sure a mouse got my first one, but I have to check these plants for squash vine borers. I definitely saw them. And it looks like we might finally have a zucchini or two as well, which is good, because I think because they're so hidden back here, maybe the bees weren't getting to them, but the bees were very focused on the tomatillos. So maybe that's what happened. I think this little corridor has been a favorite spot of mine this year, because you have just all these beautiful wall of tomatoes on one side, and then back here we have some fun stuff. So let's talk about what's growing along the back fence. But yeah, it feels like this cool little like secret garden effect. Like from the patio, you would look back here and never know that this little tunnel was back here. So I like to just come back here and be all like a little hobbit in my garden. If you've been here for a while, you'll know that these are my wedding flowers. Well, some of them. So if you are new here, I am growing my own wedding flowers. And any negative comments about that is not welcome. So please keep it to yourself. But it's been so fun. I feel like I'm finally excited about it. I had a lot of trepidation going into it, to be honest, because, you know, just got a lot of not nice things that people said. But now that it's happening, I'm feeling a lot more confident. So the plan is I don't get married until December, okay? And so your next thought is, why are you growing your wedding flowers in May? Well, that's because everything along this back fence is amaranth. There is a variety called Hot Biscuits and a variety called Love Lies Bleeding, or maybe Bleeding Hearts, the purple one. I'll put it on the screen. But we're almost ready to cut and start drying this. So once I start cutting the flowers, I am gonna make a whole dedicated video about it and the process. I just haven't really felt confident enough to document the process yet. I didn't want to do all this filming and record this journey and then have it be like an abject failure. So the amaranth is really close to being cut and dried, which is very fun. So that's why I'm growing the amaranth, and I'm growing a few other things that are going to be dried. There's some yarrow, and there is a frosted explosion grass down here. It didn't transplant very well, but I'm letting it grow. So it's not really an annual because it's a kind of grass, so I'm kind of just letting it hang. It's also gotten very choked out by all these tall plants. And these, if you're a plant person, you probably recognize these as sunflowers. And you would be right, they are sunflowers, and no, those can't be dried, but here's why I'm growing them now. And boy oh boy, there's a lot of them. So the reason I'm growing sunflowers now is to actually test them. So I have been engaged for a very long time. By the time I get married in December, we will have been engaged for almost 2 years. And so last fall and winter, I was able to test the timing of fall and winter growing. And what I ended up at is that I actually need to add 7 days because of the lack of sunlight. I need to add 7 days to the packet, to the seed packet, for days to maturity, because they just get less sunlight because it's fall and winter, not spring and summer. So that was kind of test number 1. Now test number 2 was actually testing the type of cutting sunflower. These are all pro-cut sunflowers. They are all specifically for bouquets and cuttings, and this was to test the color palette, and also how long they will last in a vase. So I need to figure out when I can cut them, because, you know, the day before my wedding, I don't think I'm gonna want to be out here cutting sunflowers. So that was all the tests, and then I want to put them in the centerpieces, get the vibes right, you know. We're not gonna have a ton of flowers. Our wedding venue is very beautiful. It actually has its own gardens, so there's not a ton of decorations we're gonna need to bring to the table, thankfully, which is why I just decided to go ahead and grow my own. So we are almost at bloom with these sunflowers, which is so exciting. And we haven't had that much sun, but it looks like we have a very sunny week coming up. So I think we are days away from this exploding and becoming like the most beautiful show of sunflowers ever, which is just so exciting. There are a couple of other things in here that didn't germinate very well, like my celosia. I actually only got one celosia, just one. So there are a couple things I might try to regrow in the fall, just more dried flowers. But oh, guys, some of these amaranths are just like breathtaking. They're almost like golden, and I can't wait to see how they're going to dry and what color they're going to end up being. So yeah, very exciting times. The other half of the back fence, this is actually what the rest of the back fence will look like next year. So I'm using half of this to grow my wedding flowers, and then the other half is kind of like the test template. So what this test template is blackberries, and I got my first rose bush, and I have this whole crazy idea that next year this whole entire back fence is going to be alternating blackberries and rose bushes. I'm so excited. I didn't think I was going to be a rose gal, but here I am. I have discovered quite a love and adoration for flowers over the last few years, and so yeah, I'm super excited. I would also love to grow like chamomile in here and just have it be maybe some like self-seeding perennials, like just have it be a little bit wild, but also just like intentionally wild. So this year, what I have in here, because I only have the one rose, is I have my blackberry vines, and they are getting beautifully established. And these that I was talking about, I ordered the wrong ones earlier, have honestly been great. They've been amazing. I also planted some 4 o'clocks, which are a type of flower. I randomly planted a bunch of zinnias. I planted a few sunflowers. I also planted some extra rogue amaranth that I had. That's like, it's doing okay, but the other ones are doing way better. But these 4 o'clocks are gorgeous. They're this beautiful yellow color. I had no idea what color they were. My cousin sent me these seeds. They have a homestead and a garden. But the blackberries are doing great. I mean, they're really just getting established this year, so the berries are kind of small. But overall, this whole section's doing really well. So I'm excited to kind of hone all of this in for next year to kind of achieve my crazy dreams. This is my only thorned variety, but it happens to be growing the biggest and juiciest blackberries, so, you know, go figure. I will say my rose needs a bit of love. I think it's really struggling. You can see it's kind of got some dead and diseased stuff going on. It's been really struggling with the moisture and the lack of sun. So yeah, we got to get this in order. Okay, so let's talk about areas of the garden I haven't taken as good of care of, and that is these onion beds. My onions are really small this year, and I think that's a direct reflection of inconsistent watering, number one, and number two, I think that's a direct result of not amending these beds. So I planted my onions in January when I had a 4-month-old puppy who wasn't sleeping, and I just wanted to get my onions in the ground, and that's what I did, and it shows, in my opinion. So I actually need to go through, one of my projects this week is to go through and pull all the onions. They're all coming out. And then this bed over here, I already have another cantaloupe vine kind of taking over. This bed needs to be planted with okra. And I'm gonna try to get that bed planted with some okra too, so there's some tall stuff and some short stuff, but we'll see what happens. So that's the plan for these two beds. But yeah, onions this year, not my best, but that's okay. We all have them. And then last but certainly not least are my potatoes. The potato vines are starting to die, which means the potatoes are ready to harvest. So we're gonna get these harvested probably in the next week, again with the sun. I think the sun's gonna kind of finish them off. We have harvested some potatoes, and they're big and gorgeous and beautiful, and they're really tasty. So I'm excited to get the rest of this bed harvested out for my potatoes. Actually, I think there might be a vine we can pull together. Let's look. All right, I think this is one we can harvest together. It looks like it's a Yukon Gold. So you always have like these tiny ones, but then you gotta dig for the bigger ones. I gotta take my rings off. Yep, there we go. All right, so it looks like just a few, but that's okay. This bed is full of potatoes. So I think one of the biggest differences in the garden this spring has been that Cam installed drip irrigation, and he is so smart. He can learn anything, I swear. He had no idea how to do it. He had never done it before. He dug the lines. I mean, he did it like perfectly. And so I've been able to just come out here, turn on the drip irrigation, let that go, and then when that's done, it takes me like maybe 20 minutes to water the trees, the back fence, the rain garden, if the rain garden needs to be watered, and then I'm done. So what would have taken me an hour and a half, I'm down to 20 minutes, which is really makes managing this amount of space manageable. So yeah, if you've been thinking about drip irrigation and you have a large garden and you are like a committed gardener, I say go for it. The supplies weren't even that expensive. There's tons of great tutorials on YouTube. So yeah, if you've been on the fence, do it. Do it. Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you about the orchard in the shade a little bit, which is made by this massive tree. So this tree that I planted last year has gotten huge, and it's got tons of peaches on it. The peaches are small, but that's okay. It's probably because the root system is small, honestly. But I'm so excited. They're just starting to kind of turn color a little bit, and it's very exciting. All the peach trees are actually doing really, really well. They are gonna need a prune in the summer. They are gonna need a summer prune. They're looking a little wild. And I've added some of these like reflective streamers to keep the birds away. And I've also had to do some squirrel remediation tactics. So if you need squirrel help, I'm gonna leave a link in the description of a video I did a couple of years ago. All of those same tricks still apply. But yeah, the orchard has seen a little bit of a transformation. So I did not protect some of my citrus trees well enough. We had a few days of a really hard freeze, and I'm talking like in the teens, and most of my citrus trees died. I had one that lived, and it was my lemonade lemon. It is a kind of Japanese lemon. And then I've replaced a couple of my citrus trees with satsumas, which are known for being extremely cold hardy. I have 2 more citrus trees to replace, but then I also replaced one with a pomegranate. Pomegranates do really well here. So I do think I will replace the 2 other spots with like citrus trees that are, you know, you have to protect them. But I have some ideas. So I have some ideas to protect them from the freeze. I have actually talked to some like OG Texas gardeners who have given me some really good advice, including like mulching up the whole trunk with mulch or leaves. My grandma had the idea of taking cotton batting and like lining the inside of the little tree jackets I already have. So I think there's some things we can do to save them and to make it work, because the idea of like lemons just gives me joy, and I'm willing to put in the work. But I did replace most of everything with like really cold hardy varieties, and hopefully we get to a good place with it. I think the last time I did a garden tour I talked about this, but we got grapevines. So these are grapevines that are being held by a steel cable back here. They are Tempranillo grapes, so they're not eating grapes, they are grapes to make wine, that I read from the Texas Department of Ag actually do really well here in Central Texas. So we got these planted, and they're doing really well. They're starting to grab on to the steel wire, and I don't think we're gonna get grapes this year, but I bet we get them next year. So making wine and fermenting and things like that is something that both Cam and I are always very interested in. So this is gonna be quite the journey, but it's been really fun because when you get bare root grapes, it literally feels like you're just burying a stake, like you're planting a stick in the ground. So watching them come to life has been an absolute joy. Okay, so last but certainly not least, this has been a very unexpected joy for me this year, and this is our rain garden. So we used to have a lot of rain that would drain downhill, and so we either were going to dig a French drain, which we didn't want to spend the money to do, or we were going to get creative. And so naturally I decided to get creative. Love getting creative, especially with plants. So all of these plants are either native shade-loving plants. A lot of them are not native, but I tried to do half and half. So we have this big beautiful elephant ear. This is an aloha elephant ear. It's kind of on like the purpley side. Right next to it, which you can't see, is a Hawaiian punch elephant ear, which has these big beautiful red stems. And then intermixed we have some wood ferns, some hostas. We have some yellow longspur columbine, which is a native. There's some obedient plant, which is also a native. And then the other plant we have in here is inland sea oats, which is going to take a little bit to kind of get established. So the whole goal of this garden was for it to be perennial, shade tolerant, and totally fine with having very wet feet. So let's get a closer look. So these wood ferns are finally starting to really take off. They're starting to look really nice. The obedient plant hasn't put on flowers yet, but I feel like it's close. Some of them are starting to kind of get some others. They're starting to bush out a little bit instead of being single stemmed. Hostas are hostas. They're good filler plants. I got a variety, so they're not all the same. Some of them look like these, some of them look like this. There was something in here eating the hostas, which I wasn't pleased about. But the inland sea oats are finally starting to really put on some growth, which is exciting. They kind of stayed the same size for a while. There is my Hawaiian punch elephant ear. She's starting off very small. She got stepped on by somebody who was doing some work at our house, which was sad. And then this columbine is gorgeous. Also, there's been this spider that has really enjoyed this part of the garden, so I try and respect its space. It's just a little orb weaver. It won't actually hurt you. It's just kind of big. So yeah, this yellow longspur columbine has been quite lovely. And then some of these hostas are just really beautiful, for the record. This wood fern seems to really love its spot, like a lot. Okay, friends, well, I have a lot of work to do out here. I've been neglecting her for a little bit, so thanks so much for watching and touring the garden with me this morning. I hope wherever you're at in your gardening journey, you're happy and abundant, and yeah, thanks so much for watching. Happy gardening. We will see you next time.